talking about my mom. You see, as the oldest child, I've been in the family the longest. After mom and dad got married, I came along about a year and a half later. And I've been with them the whole journey. Dad had a business. Many times I would work for my father. A few times because he was pretty desperate and needed help from somebody he could trust with the books. But that's a different story for a different day. I'm talking about mom. Now, I'm going to get a bit nostalgic here because I want to take you back to roughly 1965. I was about 10. Dad had lost everything. He got hurt at work. But when I say Dad lost everything, the family lost everything. There was myself, my brother Bob, my sister Lucy, and my brother Gary. Married man, the wife, and 4 kids. My father got hurt at work. It wasn't an unusual injury. Many truck drivers back then had the same type of injury. And the bosses, they didn't have any real oversight to force them to take care of people that got hurt while they were at work. Well, we lost everything. We moved to Kentucky for a while and lived with my aunt and uncle. Then we came back. It's a long story, but we bounced around with no place to live. We were literally homeless, living out of our car at one point, back when it wasn't fashionable to be homeless. People looked at homeless people back then like you did something wrong. And it wasn't until my mother found a local church in Black Oak, Indiana, a little nothing town. And I don't mean nothing. It had some of the finest people you'd ever want to know that lived there. But the town itself was unincorporated. It was part of Lake County, Indiana, and Lake County didn't want to claim it. But it had a community of people that took care of one another. Mostly because none of them had anything to speak of. All dirt poor people. Well, I remember sitting in the back of my folks' car, driving around, trying to find a place. Mom said, Dad, don't bother. We have no money. Nobody's going to rent us. Dad found a house, if you could call it that. It had no bedroom, a huge living room. Then it had a dining room that you couldn't put a table in to speak of because the oil heater sat in the middle of the room. And then it had a kitchen and a bath off of the kitchen. And the kitchen was nothing more than a counter and a gas stove and a refrigerator that Dad got from, I want to say it was the, well, Dad got it from one of the charity organizations. Dad found this house that was all broken down, didn't have a window in it that wasn't busted out. Front door didn't lock. The back door had a board across it. So it was pretty much, in today's standards, it would have been condemned. No question. The garage sitting next to it, at some point, it was a nice enough house. The garage that was sitting off to the side and to the back, a detached garage, the roof had collapsed in on it. The cinder block walls were falling down. You get the picture. Dad talked to a neighbor and found out who owned the property. And then he contacted him. He drove over to the guy's house, and we all stood by the car. He wanted us standing there. Because at first the guy said, oh, no, I can't rent that house out. It doesn't have any windows. This is wrong, that's wrong. You know, there's no furnace. It's just that oil heater. Well, back then, a lot of homes only had that oil heater. So Dad kept talking to him, and finally Dad said, I'm desperate. You can see my family. We're living out of the car. So if you, I think I laughed so I won't cry. He said, if you let me move my family, I'll fix the windows. I'll put a lock on the door. He said, I can't do it all at once. I don't have any money. Well, the Salvation Army, that's who was helping Dad out. And they had a program where if you couldn't find work, they would find work for you. Now, they didn't pay all that much, but it was a little bit. But at the same time, they had a food bank that you could use. They had construction supplies that had been donated, sort of like Habitat for Humanity, but long before that. So he was able to put visqueen plastic and staple it over the window. He was able to get a lock with a key. And the back door still had that. He made that into instead of it being screwed in, it was a drop down board. So if there was an emergency, we just knock the board up and we could get out that way. The landlord approved and let him move in. Well, little by little, they would get, the Salvation Army would get maybe a storm window that had glass big enough that Dad could cut down to. So little by little, the windows got changed to glass instead of visqueen. But I remember that house because I was about 9 or 10. Now, I know I've kind of drawn it out, but I want you to understand the desperation, the pure desperation in my parents at the time. In the mornings, honestly, we all slept in one big bed. It wasn't because we didn't have other beds. Well, we did, just in one room. But we slept in one bed for the heat. And then in the morning, there was a gallon can. 3 doors down was a gas station / oil. They would have a truck come to your house and sell you 100 gallons of fuel oil. Well, we couldn't afford that. So Mom would scrape pennies together, and I would walk down to the store. This was the wintertime now. And the man would give me a gallon. And one time, the guy that worked there thought it'd be funny. And he said it was 38 cents. I mean, it wasn't much. Back then, a gallon was not that much. But some guy was in there and just looked at him and said, really? And the guy, he immediately said, oh, that's 28 cents. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. To cheat a child out of 10 cents. Well, evidently who was standing there had some clout with the owner, because when the owner found out, that guy didn't have a job anymore. And he came down and put 10 gallons of fuel oil in our tank as a way of saying, this isn't how I conduct business. Like I said, Black Oak, poor town, but salt of the earth people. Well, my mom would do the best she could with the food she had. And there were times when we didn't have enough food to go around. Even with the food bank giving us food, keep in mind, there were 6 mouths to feed. And my father doing the best he could with an injury. And that was the best that they could do at the time. And let me tell you, the memory of this, living in this house, it was not tragic for me. I'm glad my little sister was so young she doesn't remember it. But I remember every minute. I saw the sheer terror sometimes in my parents' face, because They had no one to help them, but they had to make it work. One day, she would make something, make dinner, make our plates and set them on the table. And then she wouldn't sit down to eat. You know, I'm 9 or 10. I'm starting to figure things out. And I noticed that she filled our plates. But she said, when I asked her about it, she said, "Oh, hon, I'm so stuffed. I had to sample everything as I was cooking it. And so I've already had a meal. I'm stuffed. You eat." So I ate what she had given me. Of course, my brother, my sister, they ate a little bit and then they ran off to watch something on TV. And so I finished my plate and I left the room. I came back. Mom had cleared the table and she scraped everyone's food onto one plate. This is the important part, folks. She didn't eat until her kids were fed. And then she prayed over what she had scraped off of their plates because she was grateful for that. If you ever watch a video and you wonder, "Grandpa Chuck, why do you always talk about gratitude so much?" I had the perfect example. When she saw me, she said, "Well, I just don't want it to go to waste." But that's my memory of living in that house with the Visqueen instead of glass. Now, years later, Dad had a business. They had some money. There was a lot of lean years in between there, but never as bad as that. But Mom made sure we all ate. She made sure we all were fed. Then about a year later, a lady had a beautiful home. And she said, "Betty, I don't really care if you can pay the rent or not. You're moving. I'm renting you that house. If you can pay the rent, well, fine. If 1 month you can't, don't worry about it." We lived there for a while until there's another story about the house that Mom called Green Acres, and it looked just like it. So happy Mother's Day, Mom, in heaven. I love you. I owe you everything.